From almond moms to ingredient-only households, the world is finally ready to unearth their childhood food trauma and unpack the origins of their problematic relationship with food. For the past year, TikTok has been buzzing about these boomer parenting tropes, with hundreds of content creators commenting on how their childhood experiences around the dinner table sparked a long life of food and body distrust. I think a lot of us can relate. So today we're gonna unpack our food history together and give you some better guidance on what you should do if you've been a victim of childhood food trauma. Hey everyone, I'm Abbey Sharp. Welcome to Abby's Kitchen. In today's video, we'll be talking about how your childhood and familial experiences can shape your relationship with food. But first, you can pause the screen or look at my description to check out my disclaimer, including a trigger warning that we will be discussing some pretty problematic diet culture behaviors and recommendations, so please feel free to skip this video if it's not supportive to your journey. I also want to acknowledge that the development of disordered eating disorders, and overeating tendencies are highly complex and multifactorial. So I am by no means suggesting that these childhood experiences or a particular parenting style or parenting choice results in an eating disorder. Nor am I shaming parents who have engaged in some of these behaviors. Ultimately, they likely were victims of diet culture themselves. But a quick reminder, guys, if you're not subscribed, help your girl out, hit that subscribe button and follow me over on TikTok and Instagram at Abby's Kitchen for lots more really great evidence-based content. If you're currently struggling with your relationship with food, you're gonna wanna listen up. Let's talk about the struggles of us millennials and Gen Zs who grew up in these health-obsessed homes.
I'm feeling really weak. Grab a couple almonds.
I have a couple of almonds. Chew them really well because your stomach is not.
This is the hardest from being on our diet.
Leave it to Yolanda create a whole genre of parenting that TikTok is going wild about right now. But thanks to this clip going viral, loads of scarred millennials and Gen Zs have been sharing their experiences growing up with a so-called almond mom. If you missed it, the almond mom is notoriously obsessed with dieting in the pursuit of thinness. So think about Yolanda Hadid telling her daughter Gigi to eat a carrot instead of her own birthday cake, or the moms that always would chant "a moment on the lips, forever on the hips" anytime a donut came near.
You total binger. April, this is gonna go straight to your ass.
In short, almond moms are obsessed with weight loss and dieting at any cost, often under the guise of wellness and health. Now, ingredient-only households are another big topic of conversation right now, which is basically a commentary on homes that only buy ingredients to make specific meals. In some cases, this may be rooted in true food insecurity, where parents are trying to make the most out of their grocery budget. Now, obviously, food insecurity in childhood absolutely can increase the risk of eating disorders relating to food hoarding, sneaking, and overeating, with one study suggesting that food insecurity increased the risk of binge eating by 40%. But I'm gonna put that aside right now because food insecurity isn't exactly a behavior that we can necessarily choose to change. So let's talk about the other potential scenario, where adults create ingredient-only households to bar their kids access to perceived junk or highly processed snack foods. And some might say, hey, this is a smart way to reduce waste, packaging, and unhealthy food. And sure, in a perfect world where everyone has lots of time and excellent food skills, yeah, you're probably right. But what would I do if I was hungry for a snack while short on time, yet everything in the house would require at least 30 minutes prep time? I would probably skip the snack. I would probably eat less, even though my body was asking for fuel. For a lot of us busy, normal folks, convenience foods help us nourish our bodies with the fuel it needs. So if the covert intention is to get our kids or us to eat less, or to eat less of what we perceive to be bad, kids will figure this out. We will figure this out. Food restriction even outside the context of weight loss, as we so often see in wellness culture, can be incredibly damaging long term. Whether we're talking unhealthy boxed mac and cheese for the Almond Moms, or even healthy store-bought granola bars for our ingredient-only households. Kids who grow up being told they can't have something because it's bad are likely to become adults with problematic relationships with these forbidden foods. And it can be a really hard cycle to break. But what about when the restriction is less sneaky? What about when we're talking about your parental role model embarking on an intentional weight loss journey with the kids watching on the sidelines? For moms specifically, we know that maternal concerns about their body and weight is the third leading cause of body image problems amongst young children. One study found that preteens and teens who believed that weight and being thin was important to their moms were 2 to 3 times more likely to have significant weight concerns. And loads more research confirms that children of moms who restrict food or calories are more likely to experience negative body image, poor self-esteem, disordered eating, and become chronic dieters themselves. It's also worth noting that even if dieting mothers do not explicitly impose their lifestyle onto their children by restricting their foods, even the act of just role modeling these behaviors can be damaging. Tell me if any of these ring a bell. Did your parent ever eat a different diet meal or avoid the unhealthy meal components that she or he was serving the rest of the family? Did your parents say, "Oh, I've been so bad today for eating pizza for lunch," and then proceed to order something super low-cal or skip the meal altogether? Did they ever miss out on family time to exercise to make up for something that they ate? Did they ever casually criticize their own body or make critical comments or jokes about other people's bodies? And did they ever label certain foods as good and other foods as bad, even if just in the context of their own plate? Chances are you've been exposed to behaviors and language just like this, and as an adult, you've probably engaged in some of it yourself. And I'm not judging. Again, this way of talking and thinking about food and our body is grossly ingrained in our culture. It's celebrated. It is the norm. It is very hard to escape. But we are the most important people in our kids' lives. And like sponges, they will suck up anything and everything that we say, even if it feels like we're doing our best to be sneaky and keep it to ourselves.
Sneaky, sneaky, sir.
So we know that being on a diet ourselves can poison future food relationships, and that even participating in more covert forms of diet culture, aka wellness culture, can also do harm. But you know what's potentially even more risky? Forcing our kids to participate in these behaviors in the explicit pursuit of childhood weight loss. Let's talk about putting kids on a diet. There's no question that weight stigma and dieting in childhood can have long-term health implications. And Jonah Hill's recent Netflix documentary, Stutz, does a really great job of articulating exactly that. In the doc, Jonah shares his experiences as an overweight child, feeling pressured by his doctor, mother, and society at large to lose weight. He says that exercise and diet was framed to him as
there's something wrong with how you look.
And this ultimately led him to develop a turbulent relationship with food and his body, and he even avoided exercise as an adult due to the negative associations that he developed with it as a child. Jonah later sat down with his mother to share his experiences of being prescribed weight loss as a kid, and she admitted that her approach just stemmed from her own childhood, where her mother would make fat-phobic comments about her weight. So no shade to Jonah's mom. Like, she was just doing what she was taught herself, using the best tools that she was given when she was growing up. But Jonah and his mom's experiences are really not unique, with research suggesting that kids whose parents encouraged them to diet were more likely to encourage their own kids to do the same. It's a toxic generational cycle. But again, when we know better, we can do better. And we know that research consistently shows that children put on diets are more likely to become overweight or obese as adults, and are more likely to suffer from lower self-esteem, body dissatisfaction, and depression. As is the case with Jonah, it also can result in hating health-promoting behaviors and foods because of the deep-seated trauma that they now associate with them. Not to mention, children are undergoing rapid growth and development. They need time and patience to settle into their body's natural set point undisturbed. Dieting during these critical growth years can not only increase the risk of nutrient deficiencies, but it can also put kids at risk of menstrual irregularity or amenorrhea, osteoporosis, and iron deficiency anemia, which can ultimately impact physical and cognitive growth and future learning outcomes. Unfortunately, despite so much data demonstrating significant risks of putting kids on diets during these uniquely sensitive times in their lives, the controversial new American Academy of Pediatrics statement on childhood obesity has made best practices really difficult to establish. The new guidelines are recommending that kids as young as 6 be treated with intensive health, behavior, and lifestyle treatment to reduce their BMI. Kids 12 and up to start weight loss drugs potentially, and that kids as young as 13 who are at or above 120th percent of the 95th percentile be referred for weight loss surgery. Surgery at 13, when their body is rapidly growing and changing. Rightfully so. A lot of the medical community has been pushing back hard on these recommendations because they're now basically focusing exclusively on the treatment of obesity rather than the prevention, and a lot of these recommendations are known to do harm. In fact, they directly contradict the recommendations in their own guidelines for preventing obesity and eating disorders in adolescents. Like, make it make sense.
Nothing makes sense.
Listen, as a fellow parent, I get that ensuring our kids are healthy is our top priority. I also fully understand the importance of maintaining a healthy body weight. I'm not denying the risks of obesity here, but weight is not the only indicator of good health, and health is also about more than just physical health. We need to weigh the emotional and psychological toll of these suggestions as well. Not to mention, as I discussed, childcare restriction can actually increase the risk of adult obesity. So it's not necessarily fixing the problem long term. So while I believe that balancing the risks and benefits of dieting or intentional weight loss can be tricky business for anyone, I really, truly, firmly believe that it should be met with extreme caution in kids and teens. So we've talked mainly about restricting food in so-called overweight children and the risk for long-term overeating and eating disorders. But what about force feeding the kids who are underweight? If you were on the smaller side as a kid, you probably were forced to become part of the
Clean Plate Club.
You know, the whole finish what's on your plate because kids are starving in Africa story that everyone and their grandmother used to throw at us. And listen, I don't blame parents for this tactic. I'm a dietitian, and feeding my kids is probably one of the most frustrating, disheartening, and honestly traumatic parts of my day sometimes. So I fully get the temptation to try every bribe, threat, or game to get them to eat. But we know that this can actually cause severe food aversions, negative associations, and negative emotions toward food. Not to mention, being told you must eat overrides your innate body wisdom and intuition. One study found that 70% of surveyed participants experienced forced food consumption in childhood, with 49% reporting that they would cry, 55% experiencing nausea, and 20% actually throwing up. 72% of them said they would never eat the forced food again. Similarly, another experimental study found that children ate significantly more food when not pressured to eat compared to children who were pressured to eat. So as for the division of responsibility, which I discussed in my video right here, in order to encourage children to become competent eaters, our role as parents is to determine the what, where, and when of meal times. And our kids' responsibility is to determine how much or if they eat at all. No force feeding, no pressure, no shaming, no catering. Just a hell of a lot of patience and strapping yourself in for the long game. Because I don't know about you, but I would rather my kids be open to eating broccoli like all throughout their decades of adulthood than turning them off veggies for life just to try to sneak in a little vitamin C when they're like 4. Now, how to appropriately address kids' weight is another huge topic for another day, but I will just say that it should never be a discussion made directly with your child. If your kid's doctor wants to talk about weight, ask her or him to do it when your child is not in the room. And if putting your child on a diet is on the table, consider an additive weight neutral approach that will encourage health promoting behaviors without the shame, stigma, or high risks of overt restriction. My hunger cushion combo is a really great place to start, but let me know below if you want a more thorough video on that. So if you've watched this video nodding in acknowledgement of your own childhood eating experiences, I want you to first try to have some compassion for those who raised you. Remember that generational diet culture runs deep. But if you're finding yourself falling into some of those same patterns that your parents fell victim to, here are some key tips to break the cycle. Number one, reach out for support. We absolutely do not have to do this alone. And working with a trained therapist or dietitian that practices from a weight-inclusive approach can help us unpack and unlearn these thoughts and behaviors before they're passed down. Number two, detox your newsfeed. In order to give up the diet mentality, we have to set boundaries around the information that we consume. So don't be afraid to mute, block, or unfollow content that's triggering and not supportive to your health and well-being. Number three, find a supportive community. Whether it's online or in person, find a community of folks with a similar journey who embraces an inclusive approach to food and weight. And finally, number four, break free from the diet cycle and tune into your internal body wisdom by practicing intuitive eating. If you don't know where to get started on this, I have a whole YouTube series where I go through every principle in detail. I also want to reiterate again that disordered eating, overeating, and eating disorders are highly, highly complex. So this is certainly not an exhaustive list of the different factors that may have influenced your relationship with food. But my hope here is that with continued discourse around mental health and childhood experiences, that we can collectively help each other unlearn, heal, and break the cycle for generations to come. And on that note, I hope you guys liked this video. If you did, be sure to give it the thumbs up. Leave me a comment below on what or who you'd like to see me review next. Subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next time on Abby's Kitchen. Bye!